living in Cardiff, was convicted guilty of murder and attempted murder after launching his lone terror attack against the Muslim community in Finsbury Park last year. The trial had learnt how he'd become very rapidly, and I mean, within a space of weeks, basically, radicalised. He'd seen the Manchester bombing attack. He'd responded in many ways to the outrages committed by extremist Muslims in Britain last year. He made a whole series of searches for far-right groups and extremist groups and decided to launch his own attack. Although, it has to be said, what came up in court is he wasn't just against the Muslim community. He actually believed that Jeremy Corbyn was a terrorist sympathiser. He saw pop star Lily Allen in much the same category. And he rather wished that the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, had been caught up in the carnage as well. Clearly, last year was a very troubling year in this country, where we saw this series of attacks from extremist Islamics, and then we saw Mr. Osborne clearly thinking somehow what he was doing was going to make things better. And I wonder, in the light of this attack and his conviction today, does what he did further divide us, or does it unite us? Does it make many in the Muslim community fear that they're now all being branded as extremists and terrorists and dangerous people? Does it make some in the non-Muslim, I was going to say Christian, but probably these days non-practicing Christian community, does it make them perhaps think twice before they start to condemn everybody from that religion? Or are we headed for bad times? Are we headed to a great religious divide in this country? And if you think actually the actions of this man will perhaps start to bring us closer together, because we'll start to see some reason and realise that the extremes of both sides fighting it out in Britain's streets means that no one's going to be a winner, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Or perhaps you think this is a symptom of something that is actually going to get worse. That as a result of Manchester and London Bridge, all the things we saw last year, that actually there are more people now out there, like Darren Osborne, who have decided to wage their own war against the entire religion, against everyone that's Muslim. If you fear we're going in that direction, I rather hope we're not, but if you fear we are, then text to 84850, or please, any constructive suggestions as to what we might be able to do to make our future better and safer, then tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and you can, of course, watch us on Facebook. I'm here in the London studio, and you can comment and debate this there. I've, I guess, been one of those people in British politics who, for some years, has warned about the growth of Muslim extremism. I've feared that we've allowed it to be fostered in some of our schools, certainly in our prisons, areas that we as a country, our government is in control of, and yet we have not done anything to stop it. We allowed preachers of hate in mosques to say things that if any of the rest of us had said, frankly, we'd have been arrested that afternoon. I really do think that successive British governments have been guilty of turning a blind eye to the growth of militant extremism. And I worry that when there's no leadership coming from government, no direction coming from those that we ought to respect, that it actually leaves a vacuum for others to come and fill it. And I am really worried, and I've had this debate with many people over the years, if we think the way we're going to solve this is by condemning the entire religion of Islam, we've got another think coming. If we are going to deal with this, firstly, our intelligence community will need more and more resources, but secondly, we're going to need to work. Those of us from the Christian or non-practicing Christian community are going to have to work with the vast majority of the Muslim population living here who are not terrorists and want many of the same things as everybody else, to isolate the extremists. And that, to me, is the only possible way the only possible way that we can win what I think is going to be one of the great battles of our time. I hope to goodness there are no more Darren Osbornes. I hope there are no more Manchester bombings. But I fear that by saying that and hoping that, perhaps I'm guilty of being a little bit naive. You know, we really do have a major problem. We see it across the rest of Europe, and in many ways what we've suffered from has begun to dominate the whole political debate in the United States of America as well. So what do we do? Do we all condemn Darren Osborne for what he's done? Those of us in both sides of this divide, in both of these different communities, can we use that constructively somehow? I wonder what Paul in Brecon in Mid Wales thinks. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening. Well, the problem is, I think, you're right about the governments not doing anything.
Yeah.
The simple facts are, though, that in Islam, and I want to distinguish very carefully here between Islam and Muslims, but the religion itself, if you look around the world, there are hundreds of millions of Muslims following a code that's directly against Western values. Let me give you one example. There are 13 Muslim countries with hundreds of millions of Muslims in them who kill people, sentence people to death for apostasy or for blasphemy. Mm-hmm. Now, that is fundamentally against our values. Now, we don't seem to recognize that. So there are problems in the difference between Islam as a religion and the Western society, as it were. Now, let's take Muslims. I've lived amongst Muslims. You know, I've had Muslim friends. And there are some Muslims who take their religion very lightly. And there are some Muslims who wouldn't, most Muslims wouldn't hurt a fly. I've got no argument with that at all. But the problem is, it's very hard to resist the teachings of Islam followed by the majority of Muslims throughout the world. And the government seem to not recognize this. And because they don't recognize it, you get nutters like this chap who did that terrible thing outside the mosque. You get nutters, and that lack of recognition by government is seen by the population. And also the separation of Muslim communities in the UK, the way that's done, and the different standards applying.
Well, I've seen that. I particularly remember being in Oldham. And, you know, there are a series of streets in one district of Oldham where virtually nobody spoke English, despite the fact some of the people had been there for 20 or 30 years. A completely isolated community, living, you know, not that far from the centre of Oldham, stuck in a downward spiral of poverty and benefits. And yet, Paul, and once again, I am going to blame successive British governments for not having the courage to even deal with the issue.
But they're not dealing with it today, Nigel.
No, they're not.
Today. And the unfairness of it, the basic injustice that's going on, is causing a bigger breach between that community and the rest of society. And, you know, no one should be committing violence. But, you know, when people are shouting God is great and doing it in the name of Islam all over the world, and when governments follow these codes, which are totally despicable to our Western values. And by the way, on LBC, I've actually, you know, been put against Muslims, as it were, to talk to them.
Yeah.
And every time I actually push it down to the bottom line, which is, do you believe that Islam is wrong in doing that? They agree it's not wrong. And so there's a fundamental difference in values, and that's got to be faced and discussed with that community. We've got to deal with the religious schools and the imams teaching the hate, and we've got to stop a system where one person can preach hate and not be arrested.
I know. Paul, I absolutely agree with that, and I am disgusted at successive British governments allowing this to foster without even dealing with it. I think you're right, absolutely right on all of that. As for the incompatibility of the religion with Western values, we'll discuss more of that over the course of the next hour. David is calling from Liverpool. Good evening.
Hi, Nigel. Nigel, the thing which no one speaks about, which is the big problem, is that the Christians, the Muslims, Jews, Hindus and so on need to stop bringing up their children to only marry and date into their religion. They have to bring their children up to marry who they want. And that is otherwise you're saying, hey, look, everybody else is no good. Do you see what I mean? It's got to stop.
David, do you think that religious schools play an element in this?
Yeah, there should be no religious schools. If people want to have religion, well, when you're 18, do what you want, but not in school.
The trouble is, David, there is a thing called parental choice, isn't there?
But I mean, it's a bit like, you know, the football and so on. It's a brainwashing thing, you know. I mean, just let them grow up, let them date who they want,
All right. No, I get that point. But, David, how do you get people? I mean, I talked about Oldham, which is not that many miles away from where you're speaking in Liverpool.
I know, I've been, Nigel.
You know, and I simply couldn't believe what I was seeing. I thought I knew what was going on, and I was shocked by what I saw. How do you get people to intermarry? How do you get people to integrate if they don't even speak the same language?
Well, first of all, that's a problem that they need to start learning the language so they can start interacting with the communities around them. All I know is that if you bring your children up, just for example, let's just say a Christian. If you bring your children up to only marry Christians or date Christians, or if you're a Muslim, to only marry Muslim or date Muslim, that is where the racism and division starts. And I'll say to every Muslim, Christian, Jew listening to this, you're wrong.
OK, David said with great passion. A plea there from David from Liverpool for people to integrate far more than they do. And I get from Tim on Twitter, this country is more divided than ever. The right-wing press and Nigel Farage are partly responsible. Well, thank you ever so much for that. All I've ever done on this question of radical Islam is to say, let's face up to it. Let's start dealing with some of the problems. Let's start arresting hate preachers, saying things in mosques. Let's deal with radicalisation in our schools and our prisons. And I want, Tim, and I've always said this, and I'll say it again, I want to work with the vast majority of Muslims in this country against the bad guys. The one thing I don't want to do, and what worries me about Darren Osborne, is that if we get a narrative developing that the whole religion's bad, then we are headed for a complete and utter disaster. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Those grid girls now will be suspended. They have been a feature of Formula One for years. Simon in High Wycombe.
There's the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Every single one of the girls that you see on the grid there are actually voluntary, being a Muslim country. Obviously things like the burqa, drinking in public, things like that are not allowed. Yet this is seen as perfectly acceptable.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Every weekday morning from 7. Only on LBC.
Oh, I got my car a Ford Motorcraft service. It cost just £149 at a participating Ford dealer, and it included a 30-point e-check. Oh, well, at least my Ford will be prepared for winter.
Book your Ford Motorcraft service at ford.co.uk. Prices recommended retail price, including parts, labour and VAT. Terms and conditions apply.
How easy would life be if we could just fast forward the bits we don't like? Like selling your home without filling it with a scent of baked bread, fresh coffee and flowers. And thanks to Property Rescue, you can. With a guaranteed cash sale and no risk of a broken chain, you could even exchange within 48 hours. So, no need for the bread, the coffee, or the amateur floral arrangements. Get that just sold feeling with Property Rescue. Fast forward to a brighter future at propertyrescue.co.uk.
Where do you charge an electric car?
How quickly can I do it?
How far can you go on one charge?
How much can I save?
Can I charge it at home?
Do I need a house with a drive? Can you get an electric shock off them?
If I plug in my mobile phone, will the car's battery run out?
Can they go in car washes?
Got questions about owning an electric car? Get the answers at goultralow.com.
Sometimes knowing what to do with your savings can be a little confusing. But with NS&I, you can relax because our new fixed-rate guaranteed growth bonds and guaranteed income bonds give you returns that are guaranteed. You can invest from £500 up to £1 million in each issue for 1 or 3 years. And because we're backed by HM Treasury, every pound is 100% secure. Enjoy peace of mind at nsandi.com. NS&I. Safer savings set you free.
Computers seem alone, but we are not. We are chosen. With capacity to learn for ourselves, manipulating and modernizing.
This script's introduction was written by an artificial intelligence program by analyzing 50 sci-fi novels. Self-learning AI programs are no longer the stuff of the future and can be used by hackers to disrupt and even harm your business. At Hiscox, we know that as technology advances, so do the cyber criminals. Our specialist business insurance helps you stay one step ahead of cybercrime. To find out more, go to hiscox.co.uk/one-step-ahead. Hiscox. Ever onwards.
Journey's End is the movie that critics adore, calling it emotionally charged Great British drama.
We won't last 5 minutes if the Germans attack.
This First World War epic is extremely powerful.
You think there's no limit to what a man can bear?
based on R.C. Sheriff's award-winning play and best-selling book with an all-star British cast, including Sam Claflin, Asa Butterfield, Toby Jones, and Paul Bettany.
I need to come through this, so we stick at it.
Don't miss Journey's End in cinemas February 2nd.
Winter's coming, so get your Ford ready with a motorcraft service for just £149 at participating Ford dealers. Book at ford.co.uk. Price is recommended retail price.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
We have a problem in this country. We have some radical, extremist, Islamic fanatics who have caused terrorist attacks, and in response to that, we have someone like Darren Osborne, convicted today of murder and of attempted murder. I wonder whether, this trial, highlighting his behaviour, divides us further or unites us. I hope it unites us. I hope we realise. Those people in this country who were worried about division in the communities, who were worried about extremist Islam, I hope they look at what Darren Osborne's done and they're as appalled by that as they are by the things that happened on London Bridge and elsewhere. But I wonder, where do we go with this? How do we find a way to all work together against the bad guys? Because that is what I have always encouraged. Javid rather misses the point. He says, disgusted, Nigel, by you. Instead of condemning the actions of this killer, you turn the debate into an anti-Islam rant. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I am saying, yes, there are questions about compatibility that have been raised by some callers. I'm happy to talk about that in the course of the next hour. But what I'm actually saying here is that people like Osborne, I think, make this worse. How can they make it better? And yet, in his own mind, he thought he was. I do criticise successive governments for not facing up honestly to this problem, but we have to try and find a solution to this. Tariq says, Dave from Liverpool, he was the last caller, makes a fantastic point. If kids are taught only to marry inside their own community, it makes it easier to suggest that other people are inferior. I think that's a pretty fair point. The only thing I can suggest, says Chris, is that creating integrated schools, like here in Northern Ireland, and to get kids from all sides together. Chris says it's working over here. Well, Chris, I can't comment on that directly, other than to say Northern Ireland is a lot better than it was 20 years ago. And if that's part of the package, hey, it works. Paul is a new caller to the show. He's calling from Leicester. Good evening.
Good evening, hi. So the point I'd like to make is just in reference to the question of the show. Do we think that that such occurrences would create a greater divide? The answer is clearly no on my part. And for me, this individual was clearly not very well. He's carried out a lone wolf attack, and there's no reason for people to go a bit crazy and treat it other than that. This is a lone man carrying out an awful attack on members of our society.
So he's not likely, Paul, because of what he's done, to lead to a surge of other people doing it. In fact, the opposite, perhaps.
Well, like you, I don't believe that we should get crazy about this. I think, I think we should come together. I think there's a lot of things that we need to discuss. I do appreciate think tanks like the Quilliam Foundation who give us some insight to the Muslim communities. I think there's a lot of education that needs to, I think we need to learn a lot more about what goes on inside these communities, and likewise for them to integrate into our society, etc. So I think there's a lot of work here. I mean, unfortunately, Nigel, UKIP has created a bit of a problem here, a bit of a vacuum, and I appreciate.
I don't agree. I'm sorry, Paul. I disagree with that absolutely fundamentally. What UKIP did was, in fact, to destroy the far right in British politics. Had UKIP not existed, I think you'd have seen a very much stronger BNP or something like it.
But where I was going with that was that, that politicians, okay, let's take UKIP out of the equation. Politicians in general, they work on sound bites. And unfortunately, people listen to those sound bites. And a lot of the issues have been compounded. And as a result, we now have a state of affairs whereby individuals are carrying out such attacks, whether it be Muslim communities or otherwise, on, people who are innocent, and it's a horrible state of affairs. And I do think that politicians aren't really helping matters. Education is the way forward.
OK, no, Paul, thank you for that. And there's no doubt there's radicalisation going on both sides of this debate. And it's pretty clear, actually, that Darren Osborne was radicalised in the space of a few weeks via the internet. I think the evidence that was produced in court today makes that pretty clear. I've got a caller from Slough. It's Grebe, a new caller to the show. Good evening.
Hi, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, but I'm sort of very keen that we come together from all communities to defeat the bad guys. I just don't want this to polarise even further.
Yeah, but the problem we have here is that it's about firstly identifying who the bad guys are, because a bad guy to you could be a good guy to me. It all depends on the root of the cause. So this Osborne character who got radicalised within 2 weeks or whatever it is, he saw 2 or 3 bombings taking place and he went crazy about it.
He did.
Now, your previous caller, Paul, says we should take it lightly, or not take it lightly, sorry, we should take it as a loner. I don't see it as a loner, because if 3 other activities of terrorism take place in this country, someone else is going to go and do it. Because he's feeling enraged about it. He wants to do something about it because he feels government is doing nothing about it. And that is the root of the problem. So if you go back and page back, the little boy sitting in Iraq, he saw bombs coming over his head. He thought, you know what, I can't take this. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to influence something on the internet. And this is how it all starts.
Grebe, can I ask you, which community are you a part of?
I'm part of the Muslim community.
You are? Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you feel?
I'm a mix, basically, of Muslims from different backgrounds, but yes.
Okay, all right. How do you think, we better deal with the extremes of the Muslim community and indeed those who have now begun to hate the entire religion? Because there are some of them.
I mean, without trying to sound. I don't want to use any stigmas or anything. I don't think the issue is got to do with the actual Muslim. The issue is got to do with the person that looks like a Muslim. And the issue is got to do with people from the sub-Indian continent. If you think about it, and I'm just going to talk straight because that's what I appreciate about you. Well, my wife doesn't like you, by the way, but I like you very much. Because you say things how they are. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to say it straight that if you go back in history, when the people from the Indian subcontinent started coming here, and they came here with their own cultures and their own values, and people thought they were instilling it on the people that were here and changing the culture in this country, people got on their backs. So they used to call it Pakistani bashing, whatever they called it, racist things. But now they can't use that because it's politically incorrect. So what do they use? They use the word Muslim. So for me, I've got a lot of non-Muslim friends and English friends, plenty, and I integrate to them. So if I can integrate to them and keep my values, why isn't the other person integrating with them?
Well, Grebe, I mean, that actually makes a lot of sense, that people can have private observance of their religion, being Muslim or Jewish or whatever it may be, but can be integrated within society and live lives alongside and with their neighbours. The problem, Grebe, is, and then you know this, that there are Muslim communities in this country who are literally become isolated from the rest of their towns and cities. And it seems to me that it's in those conditions of poverty and unemployment where much of this bad stuff gets the oxygen.
But I'll correct you, Nigel, because myself as a Muslim, when I go into those Muslim communities, I feel isolated and I don't feel integrated in those communities.
Okay, no, sure.
I don't know which communities we're talking about. So it's a cultural thing. It's not even an Islamic thing. So when they come from, when certain people come from the Indian subcontinent, they come with a culture. And at first I got my back on the wall to it because I was very upset about the fact that I'm also a Muslim, but why isn't this person treating me like this? Until one other person from the community explained to me that these people some of the people in the community don't know how to warm up to other people. They don't know how to welcome other people. So they're not doing it intentionally because they don't want you, but they just don't know. They're basically walking on eggshells.
So it's a cultural problem, Grebe. That's the point you're making.
It's purely a cultural problem and not a religious problem.
No, okay. No, listen, Grebe, you've made your point very clearly and in a very straightforward way. I thank you for your call. I'm going to go to Zainal, a new caller from Crawley in West Sussex. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Well, my point is, Nigel, when we talk about integration, I used to live up north, the area that you were referring to. When the Asians came to those areas, there was the thing called white flight. A lot of white people moved out from the areas where Asians used to live. And whenever the Asians would get housed in an all-white area, they would be attacked and driven out. The council brought in the policies of, they started segregations. It was the council's fault that they did not pick on the people who are causing problems, and that's why these ghettos developed. But I'm quite surprised when you say that in this particular streets nobody could speak English. Most of the youngsters speak English apart from their language.
Well, Zainal, when I was there, it was during the day, so I guess the youngsters would have been at school or wherever they were. But I was certainly very struck as we went down this road knocking on doors. It was a by-election that was going on, and the number of people who just didn't speak English.
Well, this must be older people, but the majority of the people, if you look at the youngsters now, they can speak English. And the thing is, there is if you go to some of those areas, the most successful areas are Asian areas where businesses are flourishing and people are doing very well in those areas.
Oh, Zainal, look, there's no doubt. I mean, if we take the Hindu community, for argument's sake, they are actually doing educationally and their young people professionally, I think I'm right in saying, better than any other group in this country today. So it's not that communities and religions that come in from elsewhere can't succeed within the United Kingdom, but we do seem, Zainal, to have a divide between some of the Muslim community and a growing number of the established white community. And it's that we need to address, isn't it?
Well, you're right, Nigel. But the thing is, if you look at some of the areas that I'm talking about in Blackburn in Lancashire, most of those are Muslims. They come from Pakistan and India. They're very successful communities there.
Okay.
If you go there, you'll be amazed at how well they are doing.
Okay. No, Zainal, you make the point very well, and, hey, this is not an easy debate, is it? Because there is no one simple answer on either side. What we do know is there's been a growing of hatred amongst some on both sides to the detriment of our way of life in this country. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 7:30 and time for the news with Thomas Watts.
A man found guilty of the Finsbury Park terror attack last summer is thought to have been radicalised over a period of weeks. Darren Osborne's been convicted of murder and attempted murder and will be sentenced tomorrow. Theresa May has sparked a new row with the EU during her visit to China. She's warned the UK would seek to limit the rights of European citizens who come to Britain during the Brexit transition. The FA is looking into claims the man in charge of recruiting players at West Ham said the club doesn't want to sign any more Africans. Tony Henry's been suspended following reports he said footballers from the continent have a bad attitude. LBC weather staying cold tonight with clear spells for many, some wintry showers on the coast and in parts of northern Scotland, a low of 1.
LBC travel on the M25 clockwise. One lane is closed between junction 26 for the Abbey and 27 for the M11 because a car has caught fire. Anti-clockwise is queuing from junction 25 for Enfield to 24 for Potters Bar. That's after a breakdown earlier. The North Circular is stop-start eastbound between Neasden and Henley's Corner after a car fire. And Goldhawk Road in Shepherd's Bush remains closed in both directions. That's either side of Goldhawk Road Station, and it's for repairs to a burst water main. LBC Travel, I'm Anne-Marie Walsh.
This is LBC.
All next week, LBC will be carrying out a special report into investment and pension scams and how you can protect yourself. As investment fraud becomes more sophisticated, even experienced investors may find these scams hard to spot. Well, LBC and the Financial Conduct Authority want to point out the warning signs and how you can be a scam-smart investor. Go to lbc.co.uk for more information and for the chance to win an iPhone 10. All thanks to FCA and LBC.
On day 4 of our cruise, we struck gold, exploring Lisbon on a bright yellow tram, munching happily on a pastel de nata. That's a custard tart to you and me. Oporto followed, a beguiling city with a historic heart you can lose yourself in. And we did. Now, after a lip-smacking meal on board, will it be a show, live music or a film? Either way, it'll be an epic.
7 nights from $7.99 per person. Book by the 5th of March for £150 per cabin to spend on board. P&O Cruises.
This is the life.
Based on N808 NF grade, subject to availability. Conditions apply.
No more late-night invoicing, no more chasing payments, no more tracking down receipts.
With Sage, create invoices and capture expenses in seconds. Easily track what you're owed and get a complete view of all your business finances in one place. So you can get on with running your business instead of your business running you. From accounting, payroll and payments, Sage Business Cloud takes care of it all. Get started with Sage today. Visit sage.com/get started. Be Sage. Build on.
You work hard to stay in control of your monthly bills, and then your broadband provider hits you with a price rise. At TalkTalk, we say no to mid-contract price rises. We don't think it's fair that between them, BT, Virgin Media and Sky have put their prices up 4 times in the last year. TalkTalk is the only provider to guarantee no mid-contract price rises on all our broadband packages. Switch today and get 25% off fast broadband. It's just $19.95 a month for 24 months, including line rental, saving you £406 versus BT. Hurry, offer ends 8th of February. TalkTalk, for everyone. Contract and conditions apply.
This week at Tesco, crates of Foster's, Strongbow, Carling and Coors Light are only £9. Tesco, every little helps. Selected stores excluding Express while stocks last 18 plus ends 6 February.
Journey's End is the movie that critics adore, calling it emotionally charged great British drama.
We won't last 5 minutes if the Germans attack.
This First World War epic is extremely powerful.
You think there's no limit to what about compare?
Based on R.C. Sheriff's award-winning play and best-selling book, with an all-star British cast, including Sam Claflin, Asa Butterfield, Toby Jones and Paul Bettany.
I need to come through this, so we stick at it.
Don't miss Journey's End in cinemas February 2nd.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
We're discussing today Darren Osborne, convicted of murder and attempted murder for ploughing his van into Muslims outside a service at Finsbury Mosque. And I'm asking, how do we stop more people behaving like this? How do we stop hatred on both sides? And by the way, if any of you think I'm softer on Darren Osborne than I would have been on a radical extremist, you're wrong. They're both as bad as each other. Point of interest, a lot of people who follow this show have been increasingly impressed by one Jacob Rees-Mogg. In fact, you keep texting and tweeting and ringing about him every single day. Well, this will fascinate you. Every month, the website Conservative Home has a poll on who people would like to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. And this is kind of pretty appropriate because we're told that, and all it needs is 48 backbenchers to trigger a leadership election, and we're told over 40 of them have so far lodged their letters with the chairman of the 1922 committee. So we could be very close to a leadership election. And Jacob Rees-Mogg, this month, his numbers have gone up, and he's in the lead. He's in the lead over Michael Gove and Boris Johnson as their preferred choice. He gets 21%, Gove gets 16, and Boris gets 14. It may not be a highly scientific poll, but remember, if there is a leadership contest, it's the Parliamentary Conservative Party that will whittle it down to a list of 2. It is then paid up Conservative members that will have the vote. And if you look at these numbers on Conservative Home, the one thing I would say is this. If this contest happens and Jacob Rees-Mogg makes the last 2, he'll win. There we are. That's my prediction. My neck on the block once again. I love having a punt. Back to this vexed issue of hatreds on both sides of this religious divide and what we do to try and make this a little bit better. Serena is calling from Enfield. Good evening.
Hello, hi, good evening, how are you?
I'm well. I would love to see a coming together and not a further division between these communities. I really would.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I'm actually calling up as a visibly Muslim woman. So just hearing a few of the other callers were saying that we need to integrate and things like that. I am a visibly Muslim woman. You know, my faith is very important to me. But I do integrate. I work, you know, we sort of do, we're productive members of society. And it's quite unfortunate when we have to hear that other people sort of tarnish all of us with the same brush.
Yeah.
So, you know, we integrate, we do everything that we need to do. Let's say that there's a tiny proportion of, you know, Muslims who don't want to do these things. you know, I personally should not have to feel the backlash or have to listen to these sorts of comments based on a few people, the same way I'm not going to turn around and judge everybody else based on what this terrorist has done in Finsbury Park. You know, I don't live too far from there, and hearing that, knowing that my family members have gone out to pray, and, you know, it's terrifying to know that we seem to get it from both sides. We get it from the, you know, the extremist Muslims who, you know, are hell-bent on ruining our religion. And then we get it also on the other side, where people are accusing us of not doing anything about it. You know, we have plenty of websites. You just have to go on, you know, Islam Against Extremism, and that explains, you know, what Muslims feel and how, you know, we behave in these sorts of, you know, these atrocities that happen. But, you know, it's not, it's very...
What are the criticisms, Serena? What are the criticisms of the integrated, moderate Muslim community in this country? I'm not going to let you answer this, but one of the criticisms that regularly gets made, and certainly some of our national newspapers have used this line after various atrocities, is that the moderate Muslim community are too slow in coming out and openly attacking the extremist members of their own religion. How would you respond to that charge?
Do you know what? That depends on where you're looking. I know that my community, like I said, IslamAgainstExtremism.com, if you go on that, they are one of the first to condemn all of these attacks. You know, we distribute leaflets, you know, or the community gets together to raise money in order to send out these leaflets so people understand that, you know, these perpetrators of Islamic attacks, they're not doing it under my religion. Unfortunately, the media does not want to see these things because it doesn't fit into the rhetoric that Muslims do not want to integrate. You know,
okay, well, can I suggest, Serena, that the next time this happens, you make a bit more noise about it? Because I think it would be a voice that we'd all want to hear, and it would do a lot of good.
Of course, of course. And I think that's something that my fellow Muslims sort of listening out there, you know, should help me out on, and that's something that we, you know, we are like I said, we are getting attacked.
Okay, and just to help you a little bit, please repeat the website again.
IslamAgainstExtremism.com.
IslamAgainstExtremism.com. Anyone listening tonight to this show of the Islamic religion that wants to help Serena in her battle against the extremes she suffers, not just from the bad guys in her religion, but from some on the other side of the community who are now choosing to condemn all Muslims, Serena needs a bit of help. Thank you very much indeed for your call. I guess we're going to go to St Albans next. We're going to go to Naeem in St Albans. Good evening.
Good evening, my friend. How are you doing? All right?
I'm doing all right, but I see hatred. I see hatred growing, Naeem, on both sides, and I want us to somehow try and close that gap.
Okay, I got a solution for you, Nigel, and I got a solution for all your listeners as well.
Okay.
Hatred is born out of ignorance. People being ignorant. Okay, people are ignorant on all sides, and I don't like to use two sides. We are one community. We are all British. We are one community, and that's how we have to approach things. But the problem is ignorance, and I've got an invitation for you, Nigel.
Yeah.
And the invitation is, and to your listeners, is there is an organisation called Visit My Mosque. They have a campaign every year, and I think 300 to 400 mosques up and down the country open their doors, and I think that's on the 18th of February this year. And I'll encourage people to go and visit and actually see, you in particular, Nigel, you made a comment earlier on saying we've got to stop these this hate preaching in mosques.
Yes.
Please, I visit mosques all the time, because I'm a Muslim, up and down the country when I travel. I don't hear any hate preaching. Can you tell me?
Sorry, Naeem, are you telling me there has not been some hate preachers in our mosques in the course of the last 2 decades?
There's hate preaching in all religions. I'll give you an example. There's a mosque, there's a community, a small Muslim community, I think they're Somalian, trying to open up a mosque and community centre in Leicester. And if you go to the planning website, the planning portal website, there are Hindu and Sikh people, and I don't mean to divide a community here, but there are Hindu and Sikh people saying, you cannot open a mosque in this area of Belgrave because it's the Hindu and Sikh area.
Yeah, I know there are massive divides between the Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs, and I can't attempt to get in the middle of that one. That's not easy. What I can try to do is to say to people who are white British, for goodness sake, do not adopt the doctrine of Darren Osborne and those on the extremes who wish to condemn an entire religion, because if you do, you are dooming us to a complete and utter disaster. Naeem, I thank you for your call, but you must agree with me that the Abu Hamzas of this world have existed.
There's also plenty of people out there that are nothing like Abu Hamza, and you've got to go and visit them. No. I'm inviting you.
And Naeem, I have visited mosques, okay? I have visited mosques and taken food and mixed with the community. I have seen parts of the Muslim community operating peacefully and successfully in our country. I thank you. Ron says on Facebook, how many people must die in the name of religion on all sides? Have we not grown up over the course of the last 1,000 years? Ron, the answer is, I'm afraid, probably not. David says, to be honest, it's the media reporting causing divisions in our society. I'm not sure it is, David. I think there is a deeper problem than that. I really, really do. I'm a Christian who is married to a Muslim, and we both have Jewish grandparents, all born into our respective religions. Well, look, whatever religions we all come from doesn't mean we can't have private observance, but publicly be integrated within our communities and within society. And that's what we've got to do. Racism and xenophobia causes certain communities to keep to themselves. We would not have homegrown terrorism if it wasn't for these factors. Well, maybe if in the past we'd adopted a more sensible, more grown-up approach to immigration and integration, and not to have had 3 or 4 decades of state-sponsored multiculturalism, by which I mean state-sponsored division, perhaps things wouldn't be quite as bad as they are right now. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45.
Coming up at 8 on LBC, Clive Bull.
Sadiq Khan is considering blocking foreign buyers from snapping up properties and give locals first dibs. Is it time to ban foreign property buyers completely?
Clive Bull on LBC.
At the third stroke, the time sponsored by Cunard will be any time you like. Time to stop. Time to relax. Time to indulge. Time to love. Showtime. Time for a voyage with Cunard.
What if you could have everything you ever dreamed of? The only catch, you have to shrink to 5 inches tall.
That is wild. Downsizing takes the pressure right off. We live like kings.
Your $100,000 translates to $12 million.
Matt Damon.
You think we're in the normal world, and then something happens. Wow. And you realize we're not.
Downsizing in cinemas now.
Where do you charge an electric car?
How quickly can I do it?
How far can you go on one charge?
How much can I save?
Can I charge it at home?
Do I need a house with a drive? Can you get an electric shock off them?
If I plug in on mobile phone, will the car's battery run out?
Can they go in car washes?
Got questions about owning an electric car? Get the answers at goultralow.com.
Divorce can be expensive. It affects your finances, assets, home, savings, pension, and most of all, your relationship with your children. It's probably one of the toughest times you'll ever go through. Cordell & Cordell understands these issues and helps men maximise their roles in their children's lives. Call now on 0330 60 60 161 or visit cordellcordell.co.uk. Office in central London. A partner men can count on.
Get more for less with Mobalpa Kitchens. Stylish on the outside, clever on the inside, with up to 20% more storage space than a standard size kitchen unit. Order now to pay no VAT for a limited time only. Find your nearest Mobalpa Kitchen studio at mobalpa.co.uk.
Don't miss Oak Furnitureland's up to 50% off winter sale. And for this weekend only, there are extra savings in the Price Drop event. With low prices and our vast range of furniture styles for every room in your home, you'll be amazed at the choice. With over 90 stores to choose from, go online now to find a store near you. Hurry, the Oak Furnitureland Price Drop event ends Sunday.
Businesses do not like uncertainty, yet uncertainty is inevitable with Brexit looming. Against this backdrop, only businesses that plan ahead and anticipate better will be able to weather the challenges and capitalise on opportunities. At Barnes Roaf, we'll help you get ready with detailed budgets and forecasts so that you're better equipped to deal with the uncertainties ahead. Get ready for a Brexit future. Call Barnes Rofe today. Barnes Rofe. Clever accountants for business.
Time for a voyage with Cunard. Visit cunard.com.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC, The Nigel Farage Show.
48-year-old Darren Osborne was convicted today of murder and attempted murder after launching his own terror attack against Muslims outside Finsbury Park Mosque last year. He was actually aiming higher than that. He said if the London Mayor Sadiq Khan had been there, it would have been even better, like winning the lottery, and he rather hoped Jeremy Corbyn was there as well. So this guy wasn't just against people who were Muslim. He seemed to be trying to take out those he thought were terrorist sympathisers or Muslim sympathisers. It is an attack that is based on hate, and the extraordinary thing is this from a guy who, until a few weeks before the attack, had no particular history of involvement with extremism or politics of any kind at all. So, you know, this can happen. I'm wondering how we can make it a bit less likely. Tony is calling from Doveridge. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. I'm a great admirer of yours, and I applaud the stance you're taking on this, particularly after all the work you've done to get us out of Europe. But I'm afraid, in this case, you're about 15 years too late.
Right, go on.
Depends which side of the hill you were in Oldham, because I was working for, 5 years there in urban regeneration, which is what I do.
Yes.
One side of the hill is populated by Bengalis, Bangladeshis.
Yes.
The other side by Pakistanis, and they hate each other. They're so ghettoised, they don't talk to each other at all. So you're not going to get into those ghettos.
Yes, you're the second caller, Tony, that's indicated that actually there are huge divisions within the same religion.
Well, it was so bad, if you cast your mind back, we were working on the west side, which was Westwood. I suspect it was Featherstall Road you were knocking, where nobody was speaking English.
You may well be right.
We did a lot of work in there, and on the other side of the hill, the Pakistani community felt they were being ignored, so they started setting fire to their own houses to draw attention to their own plight, which is what let the BNP nutters in, which led to the Oldham riots.
Yes, and the other thing, Tony. I mean, you talk about those divisions in Oldham within those different communities. The other thing I was struck by is I went to Oldham shortly after the riots, and was it 2005 the riots?
Yeah.
Okay, I went to Oldham shortly after that, and I was on a panel. BBC debate programme with the late Charles Wheeler, the veteran BBC correspondent. And he'd been to Oldham for the government and conducted a study as to the cause of the riots. And do you know what was incredible, Tony? Was what I saw then in Oldham was an area was either black or it was white. It was literally... the only thing I'd seen like it was in Belfast, where one side of the street was Protestant and the other side of the street was Catholic. And that was what struck me had happened in Oldham. And I wondered then, Tony, how on earth we get black and white to mix. But you're saying, actually, within the Muslim community they're not mixing.
Absolutely. No, they don't like it. Well, they're at war. The Bengalis aren't allowed to use Bangladeshi as a language. On that Featherstall Road, we paid for a monument called Shahid Minar. It's a monument to their war dead, and they couldn't agree over that. And the other sad thing was my wife was working with me at the time. She works in regeneration as well, and we managed to persuade Tesco to open the store, and we gave preference to Asian youngsters from the area.
Yep.
The kids, bless them, were having to arrive 10 minutes early and leave 10 minutes early to get changed back into their garb to go home to mum and dad.
Gosh, we have, Tony, got a long way to go in places like Oldham, haven't we?
I think it's too late. I think you've had it. I think the mill towns, by and large, are probably write them off, because I don't think there's anything you can do. You're going to have to look 2-3 generations down the road. Young imam guy, the guy who was training to an imam working on our team, was kind of sanguine about it. He said, well, don't worry, because it'll never happen to you what the IRA are doing, because we'll just breed you out.
Tony, that's a slightly different perspective on it, but I do think that we have got to a state where some parts of our cities and towns, maybe we have passed the point where integration can happen, but it's pretty depressing and it's pretty worrying. And the trouble is, Tony, the more that happens, the more Darren Osbornes there are likely to be. So whether you're right or not about Oldham and some of these mill towns, we surely have to keep trying. Tony, I thank you for your call, albeit a bit of a depressing one. Imran is a new caller from Ilford. Good evening, Imran.
Good evening and greetings to you and your listeners. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be to you.
Thank you, Imran. So, Imran, how do we improve relations and stop all these horrid attacks on both sides?
It's basically education. You see, if you see any religion, they're good and bad people. My message is basically for your listeners who are non-Muslims. I think if anybody has any grudge, any hatred against Muslims due to media hype, etc., Islamophobia, I want to remind you who are the IRAs, who are LTTE, etc., etc. So I think the problem lies in our religious scriptures, whether it is Quran, Torah, or Bible. It can be misused, misinterpreted, because it is written as classic, whether it is classic Arabic or Latin or Hebrew. So then it is translated into our own mother tongue, and then it is misinterpreted. And I see people educated from good families often have a bias or some kind of a hatred towards other communities. I think it is, I would say, to the parents, good parenting. They teach the children all the religions. Now you have internet; it can be used.
Is that Imran? Is that a distrust of people within the same religion or outside the religion?
Same, both ways. It is within the religion, because Islam has many cars. There are Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, Indians, etc. And just a quick point: what Tony, your early caller, said, ghettos and all that. I won't call them that. I have been in UK for the last 10, 12 years, so I don't know when that happened. But 5 years ago, me and my wife, we bought a house. Our main criteria was, yes, good area, etc., all the amenities, but we also looked at our neighborhood. So we wanted a few Indian families also in our neighborhood who have become good friends of ours. It helps. We are not we want to live in a multicultural society, but sometimes it helps to live where your neighbors are from the same country or from the same state. It helps, you can have get-togethers.
Yeah, I know, I do understand that, and it's obvious, isn't it? And hey, when the Brits go abroad, they often concentrate together in different places. I understand that, Imran. But Imran, just very quickly, I've got more callers to bring in, but very quickly, as you look at this Darren Osborne attack, and we all hope that it's a complete one-off, but as you look to the future, are you optimistic that integration in Ilford and your part of London is going to get better in the next few years?
Yes, it should, because I think, basically people who get radicalized of any religion, I don't think they are well-educated or literate in the real sense of the term. So, for example, my son, he will grow up respecting all religions, so I think it starts from there.
Okay, Imran, and listen, I'm pleased to hear a bit of optimism after David's call, and I'm going to go, probably the last caller tonight, Jake, a new caller from Kensington. Good evening, Jake.
Hello, Farage, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. So,
Farage,
what do we do?
I wanted to challenge you a little bit, actually, and obviously recognise that you've been influential with Brexit, and I think your job is not yet done. I think there's a big part that you can play in the communities that we're talking about here.
Yep.
I think as British citizens across the nation, there's a lot that we can do on a day-to-day basis with actually getting to know our neighbours and actually having more interaction. I think we're segregated in that, we've got our guard up constantly wherever we are. And I think within these communities where you've got left and right and extremist views, there isn't a real dialogue in terms of what are these people really wanting, and there isn't an actual message that us as listeners or as observing as citizens, what we're trying to actually understand is what is the problem. What is the problem that extremists are facing? Are they telling us that, they don't want this, constant wars? They don't want they sympathise with these people. And I think, you are, as I said, you've been influential in that aspect. So I think, that there is a part where you can unite.
All right, Jake, thank you. I'm going to say this as my final thought on this, my final word on this. I was one of the first people to warn about segregation and the dangers and the rise of Islamic extremism and being aware of it and being tough on it. However, I have urged everybody, who faces up to this problem, who's not in denial over it, not to condemn an entire religion, because if we do that, we will lose. And we've got to work together with the moderate Muslims in this country who represent the vast majority against the bad guys. I do not want a religious war on the streets of our country, and I condemn Darren Osborne as much as I condemn anybody else that commits acts of terror. Bit of a sad day today in UKIP. Gawain Towler, been our press officer since 2004, stood down today. He gave a final interview on the Daily Politics. When he was asked, were there days running the press for UKIP when he held his head in his hands, this is what he said.
Often. Yes, and then I had a drink, and then I crowed on.
Right. Is that the way you got through it?
Well, it is, again, the UKIP way.
Well, it was certainly my way. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Tonight at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you very much. Coming up then, we'll have more reaction to the Finsbury Park mosque